One of the reasons for this particular issue of lunch and learn is because they were having some problems, especially down in the southern part of the state where Doug Pearson is the inspector, with guys, not paying attention to getting their refrigerant lines insulated properly. A couple of problems. One is that some of the refrigerant lines did not have a rating on it. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. One thing is important to note, that whatever we talk about on the program, whether I'm the one having to step in or Tony's able to do it, is that all of this comes from the codes that we live by that have been adopted by the state. The International Mechanical Code 1107.3 refers to the fact that refrigerant lines must be insulated. Any place that the surface could possibly reach a dew point, you got to have them insulated, and it says that they shall be protected. That's also repeated in the IECC code. In the mechanical code, it doesn't list a specific R value, but it's followed up in the energy code under 403.3 saying, hey, you got to have a minimum of an R3. Frankly, I don't understand that. It looks to me like it ought to be more than that, but that's what the code is. And R3 is what you want to make sure that insulation for your refrigerant piping is rated at. Here's some pictures that Doug put together for us showing examples of where, I don't know if in this case on the left here, where it says it's missing, which is, by the way, just a blown up of the picture on the right. If what we're looking at is, where they, ran out, it shrank, ran out, they forgot to come back, didn't think it was necessary. I don't know, but it doesn't make any difference. It's still supposed to be insulated. And it's important because you're going to have a lot of ponding or inclusion of condensation right there. Another thing that Doug showed was an example here of where you got two pieces of insulation coming together, and you can tell it's dissimilar. It's a different product. They both may be R3, but it would appear that the one on the right and the top is rated, or at least I can't read that, but it looks like somebody made an attempt to spend some money to put some ink on there to say, hey, this is my product and this is what the rating is. Whereas the insulation on the left doesn't have any indicator at all. And one of the things that I know that Tony and Doug would be saying to you is that the insulation pipe must be stamped with its rating. So, if you're buying some stuff and it doesn't have the R factor on it, if it's not listed and they don't care enough about their product to put, like their name and the rating on it, maybe we shouldn't care enough about it to buy it. One thing's for certain, if we buy it and we put it on, that does put the inspector in a position to where, as bad as he would hate to, he might wind up having to tell you got to replace that. Here's another example of a different type of product. And, it's not easy to do the things that we talk about. The insulation of the pipe, for example, that's not an easy thing to do because where you have seams, where it comes together down the seam and at the joints, like up there on the right, for example, where it says, oops, sometimes the glue that's provided to hold the insulation together just doesn't work very well. And I guess Tony would have a way to tell you what we ought to do, but I don't have it. So I'm not going to step over into area that I don't know, and we'll let Tony cover that again in the future. We can run through it really quickly next month at the same time that we're adding a new session. Again, we got an example of a rated piece of insulation where the insulation just pulled apart. Again, the glue for the seams just didn't work right. Especially if these things get a little bit of age on them, or, if you pull that piece of paper or piece of film off there where the glue is, and it gets just a tad dusty, glue may work perfectly, but it's only going to adhere to the dust. And therefore it's not going to adhere to the other side of the insulation. It's going to come off. That's just one of the things that they're starting to look at and to say, hey, you kind of got to be a little bit more professional about the way you put this stuff on. This is an example of where it's clearly labeled. You'd be in good shape here in terms of the rating on the insulation, but you wouldn't be in very good shape because it's pulling apart at the seams. Again, it's an example similar to the very first one we saw. Part of it's rated, part of it's labeled, part of it's not labeled, but the labeling must appear on the product. Again, we've got a good looking piece of insulation, but it's not labeled, so we don't know. You can only judge the efficacy of something if it's labeled. If it's not labeled, how are you going to know? So that's an example again where it wasn't labeled, and it also didn't extend all the way over to the condensing unit. Mini splits are becoming very specific about the line sets that they provide, about the codes that they meet. That's particularly important to them. But the same thing applies to split units as well. You want to make sure you're getting good line sets that have good insulation and they're installed properly. One of the last things that we wanted to make sure that we covered today, and this was kind of an add-on that Tony said was okay, and that was pipe enclosures. I remember about 2 or 3 months ago, had a real good dealer who was concerned about, whether or not he needed to have an enclosure around his pipe for a just standard, residential system. Well, we did some looking, and as we said earlier, local code authorities can make code more stringent or more effective, but what we talk about here is what the state says. And I know I'm quoting Tony correctly, because we're also quoting from code 1107.2 that says that if you are using a refrigerant other than a group A1 or B1, it must have an enclosure. And the reason for that is because those other refrigerants might be labeled as mildly flammable. But let's go back to the standard residential refrigerant that you use. It's not required for a group A1 or B1 refrigerant. Here's an example of an enclosure. That's what we're talking about. You don't have to buy one that's labeled for an enclosure for refrigerant pipe. I've used gutter pipe in the past and just made it look good. And so from the standpoint of you as a contractor, making your install be beautiful and professional, it's a smart thing to do, though it's not required on your standard refrigerants, your A1, B1 refrigerants. Once we get over into other refrigerants like A2, A3, B2, B3, it will be required. So it's just kind of something we threw in there that we know that we've had a dealer or two have some questions about. Was it required? Was it not required? And the reason he was concerned is that he was doing a lot of rental properties, and you guys know that you don't get to perform service on rental properties and have any extra money in the budget to do something that you had not planned for. So he was concerned because he was in one of those situations where the price had been given, it was a very low price, and he didn't really have the money in his budget to add something additional like this to it. So as we move into different refrigerants, that's going to be something you'll have to make certain that you add into your quotes. One of the things that Tony asked specifically is that if you have a question or a compliment or a complaint about code-related issues, this is the phone number that the Department of Labor and Licensing HVACR program wants you to use. It's 501-682-9201, 501-682-9201. So feel free to give them a call, and they will forward your message to Tony or to the state inspector that works in your area, and they can help you take care of it. Remember that first of the month, if our IT guy works right, we'll have these programs. The second Monday of every month. No, first Monday of every month. Is that right? Second Monday of every month. And that date is wrong. It will not be February 1st. I guess it'll be February the 8th, won't it? The second Monday of each month. Tune in, and which, by the way, if you want to tune in to the licensing board meetings, you can do that on the second Wednesday of every month, and they'll send out a Zoom notice, and you can tune into those and see what the license board meetings are like. They welcome you to do that because transparency is the best way for all of us all to understand what's going on in the world of us being regulated. I want to thank you for your time and look forward to talking to you again next month on the second Monday of the month, where we'll be talking about follow-up questions to what we did today. And Tony will be able to make necessary corrections. Also, we'll be talking about the venting of high efficiency furnaces. Important issue as the industry changes, more is going to be required of you. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to talking to you again next month. This has been your monthly Lunch and Learn.